Unexpected. Philippines threatens to cancel fighter jet deal over Trump's new tariffs. The United States might be forced to recalibrate its tariffs on defense partners after Manila's top envoy to Washington admitted that the levies would affect its ability to buy new American weapon systems and fulfill a $5.6 billion deal for F-16 fighter jets. Philippine ambassador to the U.S., Jose Manuel Romualdez, said on Friday that Manila was keen to negotiate terms with Washington, adding that his country was pushing for trade officials from both sides to discuss how we can go through this whole process. Earlier this month, Washington approved the sale of F-16 jets manufactured by Lockheed Martin, but the new tariffs might affect the Philippine economy and its ability to complete the estimated $5.6 billion purchase, Romualdez said, adding that the fighters are very expensive for us. The Philippines, a longtime security ally of the U.S. through a 74-year-old mutual defense treaty, faces a 17% levy on its exports to America under President Donald Trump's proposed Liberation Day tariffs. Romualdez argued that because the U.S. trade deficit with the Philippines was $4.8 billion, the fighter jet deal meant there was actually a $1 billion surplus in favor of the United States. It's a quid pro quo, Romualdez said, adding that he thought Trump had made it clear that the tariffs were designed to balance trade. Analysts say cost remains the chief consideration, with the U.S. tariffs' impact on global supply chains bound to raise the already hefty price tag on the jets. Lockheed Martin has over 500 suppliers around the world. You've got parts produced domestically, parts from places like the UK and the EU, and so on. Vincent Kyle Parada, a former defense analyst for the Philippine Navy and a graduate student at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, told This Week in Asia. It's a global supply chain, and the back and forth between countries throughout that supply chain is going to raise manufacturing and maintenance costs for platforms like the F-16. Sherwin Ona, an international fellow at the Institute for National Defense and Security Research in Taiwan, said the Philippines needed to negotiate a more favorable deal. He expressed optimism that such talks would succeed, however, as Washington had indicated a sense of urgency about supporting the Philippines in its defense posture. Ona also pointed to Manila's plans to procure the U.S. Typhoon missile system, which was initially deployed in the country for annual joint drills. Analysts expect Trump's tariffs to cause friction with U.S. allies and affect other deals. Eventually, the U.S. will have to recalibrate its approach given the urgency of strengthening deterrence in the South China Sea and addressing a possible Taiwan contingency, Ona said. Australia's purchase of nuclear-powered Virginia-class submarines under the AUKUS deal with the U.S. and Britain is also reportedly facing scrutiny. The tariffs definitely have an impact on the rising cost of the submarines and the infrastructure to support them, as far as supply chains were concerned, Parada said. Whether Trump recalls the baseline tariffs because of this is unlikely, given that it's a broader issue that affects not just Australia and the UK, but every U.S. trading partner. I think the real concern here is the brewing antagonism in the way Washington deals with long-standing allies like the AUKUS states. The U.S. is throwing its weight around, and that's causing U.S. partners to rethink their relationship, he added. However, Ona said that the AUKUS deal was different because of the perception that Australia is reluctant to use its new submarines to deter aggression against Taiwan. That is why there is much concern in Washington about a transfer of its Virginia-class submarines to Australia, he said. Parada warned that the U.S. might be cultivating a reputation as an unreliable partner, adding the natural response for Indo-Pacific states will be to diversify and enhance defense cooperation with other like-minded countries. Insecurity and fears or abandonment don't make for a robust alliance, he said. The Philippines' planned purchase of F-16 fighter jets from the United States may be in jeopardy as new U.S. tariffs threaten to strain Manila's defense budget. Philippine ambassador to the U.S., Jose Manuel Romualdez, revealed that the recently proposed 17% levy on Philippine exports could undermine his country's ability to complete the $5.6 billion deal for the American-made fighter jets. The tariffs are part of former President Donald Trump's proposed Liberation Day initiative aimed at addressing trade imbalances. However, Romualdez argued that the massive defense deal actually offsets the U.S. trade deficit with the Philippines, which stood at $4.8 billion. It's a quid pro quo, he said, noting that the fighter jet purchase would result in a $1 billion surplus in favor of the United States. Despite receiving U.S. approval earlier this month for the F-16 deal, the Philippines, one of America's oldest allies in Asia, now faces significant financial pressure. These jets are very expensive for us, Romualdez admitted, calling for bilateral negotiations to mitigate the economic impact of the tariffs. Defense analysts warn that the tariffs could also disrupt global supply chains tied to the U.S. defense industry. Vincent Kyle Parada, a former Philippine Navy analyst, emphasized that Lockheed Martin relies on a wide international network of suppliers. Manufacturing and maintenance costs will rise, and that affects everyone involved, he said. The issue extends beyond the Philippines. Australia's nuclear-powered submarine purchase under the AUKUS Security Pact with the US and UK is reportedly facing similar cost increases. Analysts suggest that rising costs and Washington's increasingly transactional approach may force allies to rethink their strategic partnerships. Sherwin Ona, a fellow at Taiwan's Institute for National Defense and Security Research, believes that the U.S. will eventually need to recalibrate its stance, especially given growing security concerns in the South China Sea and over Taiwan. The urgency of maintaining a strong regional deterrence cannot be ignored, Ona said. As the Indo-Pacific grows more volatile, experts warn that perceived U.S. unreliability could push countries like the Philippines to diversify defense ties. Insecurity and fears of abandonment don't make for a robust alliance, Parada concluded.